Good morning. Are you doing good? Excellent. The second full day is ahead of us now, and we start this day with another Spark session. And you also know the moderator. If you haven't been there, you see him on YouTube in Oxford or Cambridge. But I now give the floor to Tom Crawford.
Good morning again, everyone. So we will again have a Spark session. And it's funny that Holger mentioned, you know the format. Obviously, our first Spark session does not follow the format. So we will actually have a duo, two people speaking at once, so they will get twice the time, which is an excellent way to get yourself a longer talk, I have concluded. Our first speakers of the day will be a double act with Jeff Dean and David Patterson. And fortunately, for my intro, they are both very sporty. So we have a lovely theme on the introductions. So Jeff is an avid runner and apparently regularly attends meetings in his running shoes, having run to the office, and was telling me, I see you're not unfortunately wearing the running shoes today, but he did tell me last night that he will actually pick his hotel when visiting an overseas office. He will pick his hotel so it's the correct running distance to get to the office in the morning. Which is, I think that's like, it's an optimization problem, really. And David is, of course, the strongest Turing Laureate on record. On his 50th birthday, he benched 325 pounds. On his 65th birthday, he benched 280 pounds. So I think that means you could do 236 for us today, David, if my calculation's correct. Either way, incredibly impressive. So today, they will be talking on shaping AI's impact to help billions. So if I could invite David and Jeff both to the stage, please.
All right, thank you very much. So I'm delighted to be giving the talk with Dave. So we're going to talk about some work that we did last year on a paper that we called Shaping AI to impact on billions of people. So our basic approach for this was to get together a bunch of people with different kinds of expertise. So Dave and myself, and then a bunch of people with machine learning academic backgrounds, some people working on sort of AI-related startups, some people with policy experience and legal experience. And then we identified a number of different areas that we thought AI would have a lot of impact in the world, both positive and negative. And then we went out and we found domain experts and interviewed many people. So we interviewed about 24, 25 people, including some really, really great people, including John Jumper prior to his Nobel Prize awarding on AI for science, Barack Obama on sort of national security and policy related issues, Susan Rice, former head of the US National Security Council, Eric Schmidt was the chair of the first AI council for the US government, and 20 more in areas like sort of media and healthcare, various other things. And this culminated in a lengthy archive paper. It's about 30 pages long, which covered a bunch of different topics, which you see written there. We're going to have a shortened version, because one of the things we learned was that 30-page archive papers are a little too long for most people in this attention span period. So we're going to have a, I think, 8-page version in ACM appearing soon. Dave also wrote a very nice 1- or 2-page op-ed in The Economist in December. And in keeping with the theme, we also have a comic book version for people who want the really spicy, easy to read and consume version. Okay, so there's a few things we learned in talking to people, and some of these themes were common across many of the different fields. So first, humans and AI systems working as a team can do more than either on their own. I think that's a really important point to consider when you're looking at how can AI really be used in the world. We found these were common guidelines across different fields, and AI focused on human productivity produces more positive benefits than those that are focused on how can we replace humans doing things. It increases human employability, and as a bonus, in cases where the AI system is not necessarily up to snuff quite yet, humans can provide a nice safeguard on sort of double checking the kind of most consequential decisions of the AI systems. And so rather than skipping ahead to new AI innovations, we feel like there's a lot of focus that can be done on removing the drudgery of current tasks. AI systems are really good at doing these repeatable kinds of things that humans are currently doing, and that frees up more time for humans to then spend their time on sort of the creative aspects or the more sort of subtle and nuanced aspects of their job rather than repeatable tasks. So reducing paperwork of K-12 teachers is an awesome way to make teachers happier and spend more time with their students focusing on their education, similarly with healthcare workers. And the productivity focus helps both the AI systems and people succeed. Okay. To increase employment, one of the definite fears people have about AI is it's going to sort of decrease employment in lots of different sectors. And so if we aim for productivity employment in fields that will create more jobs, that's a really good way to make sure that AI can have a positive effect on employment rather than a negative effect. So as a couple of examples, we looked at kind of past technological trends, waves of sort of advancement, including like the agricultural technology revolution and computer revolution. And as one example, there are 8 times more commercial airline pilots and 11 times more programmers in 2020 versus 1970, so a 50-year period, despite massive productivity gains in both of these fields. Like productivity gains for an airline pilot is they used to fly small propeller planes not very far, and now they fly giant jetliners, and that has actually increased demand for air travel because it's much more convenient. So we have many more pilots, even though per pilot, their productivity is way higher. And so that's because the demand for these goods was elastic. So productivity gains have meant more jobs. And if you think about programming, one of the things that has happened over the sort of history of computing is we've gone from programmers writing extremely low-level assembly language code to higher-level language code like C or Fortran. That improved productivity, but it increased the demand for programming. And now we've gone from those languages to higher-level languages like Python or Java. And if you think about AI-assisted coding, that's really, in some sense, another step up in productivity where you have a much higher-level way of specifying what it is you want, and then that improves productivity. But I don't think we're at peak software. I think we're going to want more software in the world, and that's going to increase demand. In contrast, if you look at the US, I'm not talking about worldwide, but US agricultural demand is quite inelastic. We already grow enough food, and so we've gone from 20% of the US workforce being employed in agriculture in 1940 to about 2% in a lifetime, so about 80 years. And the reason for that is once you've grown enough food in the US, you don't need to grow 10 times as much if you're 10 times as productive. And so that has decreased employment in the agriculture sector, but that's enabled people to then move off and do other things, like become airline pilots or computer programmers or a number of other things. The third thing is that geography matters a lot in terms of sort of views on AI. So high-income nations are really worried about AI displacing highly skilled workers. People who went to medical school or law school and now see that AI systems can do some of what they do in their job are concerned. But low-income nations face a real shortage of skilled workers in many sectors. Just to pick a couple of countries, not to single out any particular ones, the US has quite a few physicians per 1,000 people. And if you compare it with Honduras, they have about 1/7 the number of physicians per person. So anything that AI can do to help improve sort of the productivity of the physicians they do have and make better healthcare decisions is going to be welcomed in a number of different countries. And it can enhance the quality of life and accelerate economic growth in these lower income nations. And with that, I'm turning it over to Dave, because it now says Dave in the upper right.
Yep. We're going to set a precedent by having time for questions in the Spark Talk. So how are we going to affect the AI research community? So what we thought we would do is set concrete goals that will have this positive societal benefit. And if there's not enough research to hit those milestones, we would create research centers to do the research that could hit the milestones. And the way we thought we would focus the attention is use what's called inducement prizes. So it's not a Turing Award you get later in life, but to get you to do something. So the X Prize is a great example of that. Where's the money going to come from? We thought we'd rely on philanthropy from the people who've benefited from computer science research. Towards the end, we worked on that archive paper maybe 9 months. And towards the end, we said, well, maybe we should do like a moonshot like President Kennedy did in the 1960s. And it was kind of hard to do because it was hard to pick which moon we would do. Should we improve healthcare, accelerate scientific progress, help with civic discourse? What about the people who, it will affect inelastic jobs and people lose their jobs, which one should we do? And then we realized we don't have to pick one. If we do this right, we could launch 1,000 moonshots. And then in terms of the funding, we helped start, and Jeff and I are both involved in something called the Laud Institute. It rhymes with applaud. And to do this philanthropic funding, well, and who are we going to start this with? And Andy Konwinski, who's our co-author, he co-founded 2 AI-related companies, Databricks and Perplexity. So he's going to start it with his own funds. And then we hope to match it with others. So we picked 4 moons to shoot for this fall. We're try and get researchers to write proposals for this. The 4 we picked were functional civic discourse in 5 years, a century of scientific progress in a decade, broad AI for healthcare practitioners, and workforce reskilling to counter AI displacement. We picked those after consulting with the 25 people, and we thought AI could be helpful for these. We could be more ambitious with advances AI. You don't have to use AI, but we thought this would make it plausible. So the way we're going to start this is we're going to offer 2 $250,000 seed grants to 2 teams in each of the 4 topics. And we're going to start off with North American universities. And if they win a seed grant in 6 months, they need to do a vision paper, come up with a benchmark, some preliminary open source software, and then proposals for a $10 million center that's 3 to 5 years. And it'll be due this November, and there's an abstract deadline before it. So, we've read a lot, and you read a lot in newspapers about the negatives of AI, and people often don't talk about the positives. So, in one of the economic reports that we quoted, they said it's possible that AI could double the growth of the gross domestic product of the United States. So, what would that mean if we doubled the rate of improvement? They said poverty reduction, improved healthcare, stronger national defense, and reduce the budget. So that's amazing. Another economist said potentially we could rebuild the middle class in many high-income countries which are kind of wiped out by computerization and globalization. And then, as Jeff mentioned, what about the low-income nations make expertise more widely available? But one of the things we think it's important to keep in mind, it can be as big a mistake is to ignore the upsides of AI as it is to ignore the downsides of it. Both of those are mistakes. Right now, it feels like in the press, it's been more focused on the downsides. So with that, we open up for questions. You probably don't know how to handle questions, but.
Yeah, I mean, first time. Okay, there's a very, Vint is waving. I guess we'll go to Vint first. I think there's going to be a microphone coming your way.
Oh yeah, it's the tossing
box. There we go.
I do understand the student should get the first shot, but I wanted to ask a bit more about how you are thinking AI could help civic discourse. Can you give us some examples of how it would help?
Yeah, I think if you read, this is an enticement to read the paper, but on every one of these, we have examples of progress. So one of the things on civic discourse is right now, the social networking kind of pushes us to extremes. As far as you can tell, everybody thinks one of those two things. There's various graphical versions that have been deployed in countries like Taiwan and Tokyo, where you can see that what the mood is of the whole country, and that helps bring people together. And it's been used in these countries to tackle very controversial issues, do that. Another favorite one for me, one of my high school friends is a conspiracy nut, and they showed how to use AI that, these conspiracy nuts really believe in what have strong in their beliefs, but you put a large language model against him, and after a while, he runs out of arguments because it doesn't give up. And they've measured, and this is long lasting. Like 2 months later, people are less conspiratorial after going through those sessions. So there are examples where AI have done these promising things on these very difficult problems, and which is one of the reasons we picked.
Another one I think was a sort of language model that would look at what people were going to post and then sort of make some suggestions of like, oh, you're being a little incendiary there. Maybe you do want to like rephrase that in a more polite way. And so I think
and they did it both ways. They just had people meet without a filter, and that pushed people further apart. And then with a little diplomatic aids, they got closer.
Yeah.
Okay, throw that thing at somebody else. Well, there's a person right there.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm a believer that, AI does indeed increase productivity, but how do we measure this amount by which productivity improves?
Well, there's people in the business school love productivity measurements. And in the paper, there's a half a dozen studies on different fields, often where they would take the newer people in the field and give them AI, and they often could outperform using whatever metrics they used, whether it was consulting or writing. They would outperform the more experienced. So there's the paper has, and they were like several measures that were like 20 to 40%. There's a bunch of things in programming too, probably.
Yeah, within Google, we actually have pretty good productivity measures of how people, our own internal developers, are using the AI-assisted tools we have for helping with coding. So we've gone, I think, from about 2 years ago, 2% of the characters checked into our source code repository system were generated by AI. And then within that 2-year period, we've gone from 2% to 9% to 15%, I think, to like 23 to 24% of the total characters checked into the repository. Now, these are probably the easier characters of the programming. People often tend to generate things that are boilerplatey or generate unit tests with the AI-based systems. So it's not like the most intellectually stimulating characters, but still 24% of characters is a pretty significant, productivity improvement for people because it's actually, characters they don't have to type.
But I think the paper has like a half a dozen studies, and they're all in the 20 to 40% kind of productivity boosts. I see a hand. I see hands in the aisle.
Hands. Look at that. So many questions.
Oh yeah. See, you just have to leave time.
So there's a lot of feeling that everything happened recently, but if you look, say, in Semantic Scholar, the literature's been doubling every decade for hundreds of years, and I wonder if this is just an exponential, and what we should be worried about more is like the time constant. And I'm wondering if what we're talking about here is what would it take to get the literature to double, to increase the doubling rate to be even faster than it's been over hundreds of years.
This is in terms of like doing a century of science in a decade?
Well, right, yeah. So you're talking about changing the time constant there, but one of the things I think you really should look at is what the time constant's been over a long time. It's actually kind of stunning. It's been going up faster than the investments say.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think one of the hopes with science is that AI for science in a number of different scientific domains can be used to sort of more rapidly come up with, plausible hypotheses, to come up with automated experimental loops, and to sort of create sort of faster rates of scientific breakthroughs in a number of different fields. So Sanjeev's talk yesterday gave a good intro into how it can be used to sort of tackle mathematics in various ways. And I think that's a promising thing for many different fields where you can have this sort of no human in the loop in the actual experimental phase. And it's more humans sort of curating what are the interesting directions and hypotheses to go pursue.
This particular moonshot was directly related to Dario Amodei, who's one of the founders of Anthropic. And he has a paper that talks about, in his experience as a neuroscientist and biologist, he thinks it's plausible you could do 5 to 10 times acceleration in 50 to 100 years. So it's inspired by that paper. So we'll see. Look, there's hands there.
For the schools of tomorrow, and I don't mean tomorrow to be far away, at what age do you think young people should start learning about AI? And I don't mean use, I mean learn about. Primary school, secondary school, when?
I mean, I think pretty early. I mean, I would say like late elementary school or early middle school is a good time to sort of start introducing the concepts of how to think about breaking problems down into steps and thinking about how to solve some of those sub-steps and maybe introduce some early programming. You know, I started programming when I was 9 and it didn't.
You did?
Yeah.
There's a slight age difference here. I started programming at 21, I think.
Okay. So, I mean, I think it's not a bad set of skills to have, even if someone isn't going to go on and be sort of someone involved in writing software. Just that kind of way of approaching problems is a really helpful skill in general. And I would say, you know, relatively early. And in terms of when they should use AI systems in their education, I think that's also, you know, it's sort of like when calculators got introduced in math classes. Some math teachers were like, oh no, we shouldn't use any calculators because they'll never learn how to add. But I feel like those who embraced it as a new tool really pushed the math curriculum forward, because all of a sudden you could do more mathematics by removing the drudgery of the calculations and focus on sort of more concepts.
Yeah, I think, you know, I think the university's reaction to, oh my God, everybody's going to cheat, let's stop AI, wasn't the most enlightened reaction.
Yeah,
we should be, you know, how do we, I think that's what all computer science, how should we be teaching our technology in light of AI? That's the right question going forward.
It's the age of enlightenment.
Age of AI enlightenment. Okay, I think we'll stop early. How about that?
Okay, thank you.
Back on time. Right, so our third and final speaker of the Spark session before we move into the first panel of the HLF is Leslie Valiant. And Leslie is part of an even more select group of laureates, as there are 10 in total who have won multiple prizes. Leslie, of course, was awarded the what is now known as the Abacus Medal in 1986, and also the 2010 Turing Award. There is a pattern to the laureates that have multiple prizes. So if you want something to think about, try and figure out what that pattern. Well, I'd say there are 2 patterns. I found 2 patterns. See if you can spot them. So today, Leslie will be talking on education and educability. Leslie.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I am also talking about AI, but now the question is more, you know, what is AI and what can it be? So I think as far as the history of AI, progress was always made by trying to define particular functions you want to do, like search or reasoning or learning, rather than using words like superintelligence or even intelligence. Even I think the phrase artificial intelligence has not been that useful. So this is in continuation of the same kind of search of trying to define what our cognitive capability is, which we're trying to reproduce by machine. And so what I'm describing is very quickly is an endeavor I've been involved in recently. Okay, so we're trying to capture the notion of knowledge processing, and the general approach is that you know, we humans evolved relatively fast from our predecessors, and the hypothesis here is that we derived a capability which is particularly human and is our cognitive capability. And from this relatively simple change, simple capability, all the complications of our behavior arise. So we play chess, we talk, we use language, but these complicated things aren't what evolved directly, but there's some simpler cognitive capability which evolved directly. And that's what we're trying to chase down. So doing this by quotations, so Aristotle said that all belief comes from syllogism or induction, and induction clearly is modeled now by and realized by machine learning. That's under control. And syllogism is reasoning. So that's a start. Okay. Okay, yes. Okay, but then a second quotation is from Gödel, and it says that Turing has for the first time succeeded in giving an absolute definition of an interesting epistemological notion, and this was computation. And an absolute definition meant that it did not depend on the formalism chosen. So this was really a tribute to Turing, his rival. So computation is important. But then recently I realized that this quotation is really has said something else also. So after all, Gödel was a logician who worked on reasoning. And so in some sense, he was admitting that he had failed to find in reasoning, he and his collaborators had failed in finding for reasoning such a robust notion. And I think that people, after 100 years, before and after his work, agree that reasoning maybe isn't the primary notion in human cognition because people haven't found it's a real phenomenon, but people haven't found a simple definition for it. So we have to replace it by something, and that's what I've been searching for. And okay, so what should we replace it with? And so I've made up a combined notion, which I call educability, and this is what I'm talking about, and which I suggest is a kind of a reasonable stand-in for a certain area of what humans are good at. So I won't have time to describe the details, but since I'm using educability, clearly I'm referring to education, and that's a good first approximation. So clearly education is all around us here. People are listening, come from all over the world. So humans spend all their time in educating themselves. Those who are not listening are looking at their cell phones, equally educating themselves, or talking to people next door, equally educating themselves. So I want to try to capture all those phenomena. And so instead of telling you the definition, I'll just focus as a sideline to talk about education. Since I'm using that word, I should be honest, I should talk about education. So one would hope that if one understands this notion better, then one side effect would be that we understand education better. And so I've just picked up here a few interesting questions which people have asked about education, which I think are very important, and highlight the fact that we don't give much respect to education as a science. We invest a lot of resources, but we just don't understand education. And this should be a first priority as far as a list of intellectual challenges which humanity should face. So for example, one question which people have asked for a long time, are there academic disciplines? So in many countries in Western Europe, 100 years ago, people did believe that if you studied Greek and Latin, then you became a better person. Okay, so this was a discipline which gave you much more than seemingly. So some people tried to investigate this, and so Thorndike is a famous example. So he trained people to estimate the size of rectangles, and if you train people with different size rectangles, they become better. They predict the size of rectangles more accurately. And then he's asked, well, are the well-trained people also good at recognizing triangles? And the answer was no. So actually, if you look at the original papers, it's all very statistical. Who knows how convincing it is? But still, the main force of this is very widely quoted, and this idea has come down to us in the I think in modern parlance, in the trade, they would say that current thinking is that it's very hard to find good evidence for far transfer. So people do all kinds of experiments on training people and testing them on something else. And it's very hard to establish that you've educated people and that they've gained some skills beyond what you've taught them. So this runs very much counter to, I think, our intuitions and our hopes in this room that we think education is pretty good and has a wider impact. But this hasn't been proved. And I think, having a more formal definition of what education is, coming from computer science, where we're good at definitions, I think there's an important role there, which personally I'm quite interested in pursuing. So as far as people in doing research in education-like things, so quickly I can mention other things which don't address this question directly. But so expertise is one thing which can be studied. So you study very specialist skills like playing the violin or chess, where people are highly trained to do things very well. And then you can measure how well they do it because there's wide agreement on how well they do it. So Anders Ericsson is famous for this idea that of deliberate practice. So the idea that if you practice the piano every day, you don't become a fantastic pianist. But if you're trained by some trainer, then you can. So deliberate practice is when you develop skills that other people have already figured out how to do, and for which effective training techniques have been established. And the practice regimen should be designed and overseen by a teacher or coach who's familiar with the abilities of the expert, performance, et cetera, et cetera. So he famously came out with this idea that to become an expert in anything, you need to train for 10,000 hours, and not just train, but do this deliberate practice. So this has been popularized by many other people. But again, if you look at the literature, it's not quite totally convincing. So you find in the references he gives that to achieve master chess level, the range is, some people do it in 3,000 hours, others take 23,000, and I presume there are some who never do it. But even with this deliberate training. So I'm just saying that there's connections between doing education research and what computer scientists do. Something even closer to what we do. So of course in universities, in teaching STEM, there's a lot of interest in, a lot of activity in using new methods of teaching, active learning, inverted classrooms, enhanced teaching methods. So unfortunately, there's no single idea of what this is, but it's widely practiced, it's widely studied. So there's an interesting review paper where they look at 225 studies, which all show that if you do this, then you get students can do better grades than if they do something else. But again, whether this is scientific enough, this kind of research, to persuade scientists to use it isn't so clear. So people do these various teaching methods for their own reasons. But in the teaching research world, I mean, there is work which is one can do, which could throw light on the kind of issues we should be interested in. So, for example, these are results from Carl Wiemann's group at Stanford. So this is training engineering students in various design skills. So the interesting thing here is that he defines the actual skills which he wants the students to learn, and then you can trace how individual students do well at the beginning of the course and at the end of the course, and using these kind of methods, one can, in principle, answer broader questions of whether there's transference, other ways of teaching students, so that it's got broader benefits to their education. So I've got this model, which corresponds to what I think is an important part of human intellectual capability, which is very education-like. And again, without telling you what it is, there are two aspects to it. Is that one part is that there's some things which all these systems would have to have. So this is, you can interpret it as designs for an AI system. So AIs will want to reproduce all these capabilities. Whereas the other things are parameters, the idea that in some directions, there isn't a unique thing to do. So for example, in current AI systems, if you train them, where do you get the data from? And there's an option. If you make a standalone intelligent system, who should it trust? Who should it listen to? So these are parameters because we don't believe that there's a unique, optimal way of choosing where to get your data from. You may be very conservative and rely only on information which is very, very well corroborated somehow, or you may be willing to take more risks. And another direction is some notion of creativity, which here just means that the ability to create new concepts by combining concepts which the system already knows. And again, here one suspects that, this is very important of course, that there are different options you can make with different computational costs, and maybe different humans have made different choices. So, okay, so just to finish, so the general outlook here is that there is a kind of a simple description of what AI can be. So I think partly this would answer some of the issues in AI. So around the room, around any room, there's a lot of anxiety about AI. And the reason for the anxiety, I think, is that one needs to draw some circle around it about what it is. People say a lot of things about what AI can do, but they don't tell you, what AI is. So for example, in chess, computers play chess better than humans, but this doesn't seem to cause chess anxiety because people play chess and they know that machines play the same old game. Okay, so there's nothing frightening about what the computers are doing. Similarly with computation, as far as we know, Turing got it right, and he described what computation is, and we're not afraid that someone will discover some machine which is totally different and do more. And I think with AI, it's going to be similar, that we are going to describe it scientifically about what the systems are, and because it will be things which are familiar, so these systems will do tasks which we're familiar with, humans can do, maybe they can do it faster, but they won't do. But we'll know that they won't be doing things which we totally don't understand and are from a different planet. So I think this is a very important part, I think, of doing AI research, is to describe it in ways which not only suggest how we should make better systems, but also reassure people that these systems are not from another planet. So thank you.